Today we're going to make chocolate chip banana muffins, one of my favorites. And just keep in mind, the more bananas you put in, within reason, the more moist your muffins will be. And it also doesn't have a lot of sugar in it. And this is one of the recipes that is really easy just to mix by hand. So gather together. So we need to preheat our oven, and it's to 375. So we're going to preheat at 375. And we're also going to check and make sure that we have our racks positioned in the proper place. And I just took the bananas out of the freezer, and they're going to need to thaw out a bit, but by the time they're thawed, they're going to be nice and mushy and easy to squish up so that we can put them in our muffins. All right, I have my thawed bananas in a bowl and very watery, which is why I like to freeze them. It seems to bring out the moisture, and I'm going to mush them either with a fork, or I've actually got a pastry thingamajig here, the pastry cutter that's used for making pies, and I find that this works quite well. I've mushed the bananas as much as I can so that there's not too big of lumps, and I have also beaten my egg. We don't want it to stick into one spot. And I've pre-measured my olive oil. Now you can also use butter. There's just half of a cup of butter and you just melt it. And for this recipe, I'm kind of lazy and I just prefer to use the olive oil. Or also works if I've run out of butter. And I mix this together as much as I can. Again, once you combine the dry ingredients and the wet ingredients together, the baking soda and baking powder start to have a reaction that actually causes the muffins to rise. And if you miss that certain window of opportunity, your muffins will not rise nearly as much. All right, our first step is to put all of our dry ingredients into a bowl and mix them together thoroughly. This helps to make sure that when you're mixing your wet ingredients in, that everything is the same and you're going to have your leavener throughout the entire batch of muffins. So we've got 1.5 cups of flour we can put in, and half of a cup of white sugar, and we've got 1 teaspoon of baking soda, 1 teaspoon of baking powder, and half a teaspoon of table salt. We just have to make sure that it's all together. Looks like the sugar's been mixed in. Can't see any lumps of baking soda or baking powder or flour or anything. Just has to look nice. All right, so I've got my dry ingredients, and the last thing we're going to add is our chocolate chips. And we can add these into our dry ingredients so that they become coated with a little bit of the flour. Now we've added our wet ingredients. And when we're mixing this, we want to mix as little as possible so that they stay tender. Muffins tend to get hard and a little bit tougher if you overmix them. And this batter, as you can see, is fairly thick, which is how you want it to be when you're putting it into the muffin cups. All right, so we've got our muffin papers in our muffin tin, and if you want, you can just put Pam on your tin rather than put in muffin papers, but I just prefer the papers because they're much easier to get out. You just fill up your muffin cups about 2/3 to 3/4 full, and you just go until you've used up all of your batter. I'm finished putting all of the batter in. They're not quite right to the top. That's because they're going to expand. You'll have to experiment with it on your own to see exactly how much to put in. But because I've added a little bit more banana than the original recipe called for, I have a lot more batter. And so instead of getting just a dozen, I get 20, which okay, I now have them in the oven, and they're going to take 20 to 25 minutes. So I'm going to set the timer for the minimum amount of time, and then I'm going to check them after the minimum amount with a toothpick in the center. And if the toothpick comes out without anything on it, that tells me that they're done, and I'm not going to burn them. So now I'm going to take out one of the muffin tins and just check it in the middle to see if it's done. Yep, it's done. Now, I highly recommend that you do not leave your muffins in the pan to cool, because they get too moist and then it ruins the texture. So you just get them out as quick as you can and gently turn them over. Now you may notice that some of them are a little bit closer to the top of the muffin papers, some of them are a little bit shorter. That's just because of how much was actually put into them. And so you can experiment as you make them another time, just exactly how much you'd like, but as you can see, they did in fact rise. Now, if you take too long to get them into the oven, after the time that you mix the wet and dry ingredients together, you may end up with them not rising at all. So you got to make sure that that part it goes quickly, and ensure that you get them into the oven and that it's ready and hot when you are. I hope you've enjoyed your banana chocolate chip muffins. Remember to leave your comments and questions when you visit us at sweetietreats.ca. Let us know how yours turned out. We'd love to hear from you.